The year was 1865, and winter had laid its claim across the frontier with a grip so cold it seemed to steal the very breath from a man's lungs. Snow drifted in steady, whispering sheets, settling over the world like a shroud. Everything was muted, sound, color, even hope. Before the old wooden door of a lonely log cabin, Arlen stood with his sisters and the elder woman who had saved them more than once. Their breath curled into the air in pale ribbons as the world waited with them, still and watchful. It felt as though fate itself hovered in the snow, refusing to fall until something unseen broke the silence. Arlen's hand hovered near the worn stock of his rifle. He wasn't touching it, not yet, but the tension in his fingertips suggested he could draw it in less than a heartbeat. His coat, black as a raven's wing, snapped in the wind, revealing the leather gunbelt that had saved him and doomed him in equal measure. Snowflakes clung to the brim of his hat, melting slowly as if uncertain whether they dared to linger. He stared toward the tree line, listening for sounds his sisters could not yet hear. Lyra, the younger of the two, shifted beside him. Her cheeks were chapped from the cold, her braids stiff with frost, but her eyes, dark, steady, and far too old for her years, never left her brother's face. "You hear something," she whispered, not as a question, but as an acknowledgement. She knew him too well to ask outright. Arlen nodded once. It was barely a movement, but the kind that spoke of trouble. "Horses," he murmured, still distant. "Not long now." Mira, the older sister, tightened the shawl around her shoulders. She was the calmest among them, though her calm had a different origin than Arlen's. Where his came from scars and battles survived, hers came from acceptance, the quiet resolve of someone who had lost much and learned not to scream at the sky for answers. But even her steady breath faltered now. Behind them, elder Nyra stepped forward, her boots sinking into the snow with soft cracks. Her cloak, rich with embroidered patterns of her people, fluttered in the brittle wind. She studied Arlen with the patient gaze of someone who had lived long enough to see storms come and go, storms of weather, storms of men. "These riders," she said, her voice low and confident, "are they the same who hunted you in the valley?" "They are," Arlen replied. His jaw tightened. "And they're not going to stop." The world around them seemed to hear his words and retreat into deeper silence. Snow gathered on the roof of the cabin, threatening to bring the whole structure down if it grew any heavier. This place had never been meant to shelter fugitives, but it was the last refuge they had. Arlen took a slow breath, letting the cold burn down his throat. He needed clarity. Winter sharpened everything: sound, memory, fear. The memory came unbidden, rising from the smoke and blood of that cursed day at the trading post. He had walked into it thinking the biggest danger was the price of ammunition. Instead, he found a room thick with anger, white traders yelling, a Cheyenne man standing tall but cornered, a bottle smashed on the counter. Arlen had stepped between them, hands raised, trying to calm the chaos. He had almost succeeded. Almost. A rifle cocked behind him. A voice barked, "Move, or I'll drop him where he stands." And then the first shot. Smoke swallowed the room. Screams tore through the air. His brother fell beside him, eyes wide, as if surprised by death. Arlen blinked the memory away, jaw clenching. The cold helped. It always did. But nothing stopped the guilt that clawed its way up whenever he stood too close to danger. He had led his siblings here, believing this remote settlement would buy them time. But time, it seemed, had run thin. The wind carried a sharp, metallic ringing, horses striking frozen ground. Closer now. Too close. Arlen stepped forward, positioning himself between the cabin and the sound. His body blocked the door as if he alone could hold back the world. His sisters moved behind him without being told. Elder Nyra placed a steadying hand on Myra's shoulder, though the elder woman herself showed no tremor of fear. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them. But Arlen felt a strange stillness to the air, as if even the storm had stopped to see what would unfold. He scanned the white horizon, and there, between the pines, shadows flickered. Men. Horses. 5, maybe 6. Hard to tell through the falling snow. Lyra exhaled sharply. They found us. Arlen didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like the breath they all shared. Mira glanced at the cabin door behind them, worn wood darkened by years of weather. If they attack, this place won't hold long. It only needs to hold long enough, Arlen replied. Elder Nyra stepped to his side, eyes narrowed against the flurry. You cannot fight them alone. I'm not alone, Arlen said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. Good. A man who knows he is not alone stands stronger. The riders emerged fully now, dark shapes on the white landscape. The snow muffled their approach, but Arlen could hear the jingle of bridles, the rough breathing of horses, the low murmur of hardened men preparing for another chase. The lead rider slowed, lifting a hand. The others followed suit, forming a half-circle around the cabin. Arlen stepped forward, boots sinking inches into the snow. His fingers twitched toward the rifle, but did not grasp it. He forced himself still. The lead rider leaned forward in his saddle, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Arlen Crow, the man shouted, voice cutting clean through the frostbitten air. Step away from that door. Lyra flinched. Mira tensed. Elder Nyra stood firm. Arlen remained silent, because silence was the only power he felt he still held. The man on horseback tilted his head. We know you're in there. You can't outrun what you owe. Snowflakes drifted between them, soft, delicate shapes falling into a moment built of steel and gunpowder. Arlen's heartbeat hammered cold and deliberate in his chest. He lifted his chin, refusing to show fear. The lead rider smiled, a small, cruel twist of the mouth. Come out, Crow. Let your family live. The wind stilled. Arlen spoke at last, voice low but unyielding. If you want me, step off that horse. The riders shifted. Tension cracked the air like thin ice beneath a heavy boot. Snow fell harder now, thick flakes spinning between the living and the dying. In that frozen moment before violence, everything, past, present, fate, held its breath with them. Elias Boone felt the weight of the frontier long before dawn lifted over the ragged hills, its pale light spilling across dust-bitten plains like a muted warning. He rode, with a stiffness earned from long, punishing miles, each one carving a reminder of debts he had yet to settle. The air tasted of iron and sage, carrying rumors that trouble had begun to coil around Red Hollow. Elias trusted those whispers. Trouble rarely lied in the west. He guided his horse toward the young settlement, little more than a few cabins and stubborn hope clinging to the valley floor. Thin trails of smoke rose from chimneys, wavering like nerves stretched too tight. The town had been built with grit, but grit alone could not keep predators at bay. Elias rode in with the quiet focus of a man who had seen towns like this broken before and had no intention of watching another fall. Near the well, a woman stood with sleeves rolled to her elbows, her posture purposeful. Clara Dorsey lifted her gaze at the sound of hoofbeats, eyes sharp beneath her sun-bleached hat. She ran the boarding house alone now, ever since her husband had vanished on a cold morning that still haunted her. Hardship had not hollowed her, it had forged her steadiness. Elias recognized that kind of strength instantly. Your boon, she asked. Sheriff said you'd arrive before week's end. I'm here, Elias replied, stepping down from his saddle. Your sheriff made it sound like Red Hollows facing something meaner than rustlers. Clara nodded toward North Ridge. Cinder Trail Gang. They've been prowling again. Took cattle, burned a family out east. Folks are scared. Before Elias could answer, Sheriff Harlan Sloan approached, heavy-set and hollow-eyed from sleepless nights. His badge gleamed brighter than the hope in his expression. Boone, we're stretched thin. Cade's men are gathering supplies, ammo, horses, anything they can steal. I think they're planning to take the whole town. Clara folded her arms. And once they take it, they'll ruin everything. Elias studied both of them, sensing fear, but also resolve. Red Hollow wasn't ready for the storm building on the ridge, but it wasn't without spirit. Where's their camp? North Ridge, Sloan said. Hidden but close enough to watch us. Elias nodded. Then I need to see it for myself. Clara hesitated, then spoke with quiet urgency. Take my brother Jonah. He knows the ridge better than anyone. Elias disliked pulling the young into danger, but time was thinning. Send him before sundown. Clara's expression softened, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her worry. Elias turned before the warmth in her eyes could pull at him. Attachments out here demanded too steep a price. Jonah arrived later, rifle slung across his shoulder, nerves tucked behind youthful bravado. Clara said you needed a guide. I need someone steady, Elias replied. Think that's you. Jonah grinned. Reckon so. They set out under a bruised twilight, the sky smearing into deep purples and fading golds. As they approached the ridge, the land grew sharper, the silence heavier. An omen Elias had learned to read well. From a crest, they spotted the gang's camp nested in jagged stone. Fires burned low, shadows shifting around crates and tethered horses. Men moved with purpose, their confidence unsettlingly sure. Elias crouched, eyes narrowing as he observed more than simple raiders' preparations. Crates of ammunition stacked, orderly. Fresh horses. A large map pinned beside the fire, its edges weighted with stones. They're not planning a raid, Elias murmured. They're planning a takeover. Jonah swallowed. Whole territory? Maybe more. Thunder rumbled softly across the valley, not from the sky, but from the footsteps of men below, readying themselves for violence wrapped in ambition. Cade wasn't searching for spoils. He wanted dominance. Elias felt a cold clarity settle in his bones. Red Hollow wasn't merely in danger, it stood on the edge of erasure. Jonah's voice trembled despite his effort to steady it. So what now? Elias rose, jaw tightening as the firelight flickered against the distant outline of Red Hollow. We go back, and we prepare them. Because at dawn, the fight won't be for a patch of land. It'll be for the right of these people to exist. They mounted their horses, the night stretching before them like a long road carved from destiny and dust. Jonah stayed close, no longer grinning but determined. Elias felt something shift then, not fear, but responsibility settling with familiar weight. As they descended the dark ridge, Elias knew one truth with absolute certainty. Morgan Cade believed no one in Red Hollow had the spine to stand, but he had not yet met a man who had nothing left to fear, nor a town held together by the grit of those who refused to bow. Elias would make sure Cade learned both before the sun rose. The ride back was slow, every hoofbeat echoing through the valley like a warning drum signaling the fate that crept toward Red Hollow. Elias kept his gaze on faint lantern glow shimmering from distant town, imagining the people inside. Families clinging to thin walls, workers finishing their last tasks, Clara likely pacing her porch with worry disguised as resolve. They had no idea how near the storm crouched. Jonah broke the silence. You think the town will stand with us? They'll have to, Elias said. Fear's a strong wind, but it can push a man forward as easily as it can knock him down. Jonah considered that. And Cade? You've seen men like him before? Too many, Elias replied. Men who think the world owes them because they never learned to build anything worth keeping. The boy nodded, as though storing the words for some future reckoning. Elias almost admired him for it. Frontier shaped its youth harshly, but sometimes it forged them sharper than iron. As they neared Red Hollow's edge, Elias felt a firm certainty rising inside him. Whatever dawn carried, gunfire, smoke, blood, it would not find the town unprepared. And if Cade wanted to burn the territory to the ground, he would discover that some fires could be met only with unyielding stone. Elias Boone intended to be that stone now. Dawn crept slowly over the snowbound valley, pushing thin fingers of light across the jagged ridges, as if the day itself were afraid to rise. Arlen Crow had not slept. He had sat through the long hours of darkness with his rifle laid across his knees, gaze fixed on the dim horizon where shadows moved like restless spirits. Every breath of wind felt like a whisper warning that the hunters who circled them last night would return with the cold light of morning. His sisters slept in fits inside the cabin, huddled close beneath heavy quilts. Elder Nyra rested upright against the wall, as if even in sleep she listened to what the land had to say. Arlen envied her calm, his own thoughts twisted like thorn vines, binding tighter as the sky brightened. He replayed every choice that had led them here, to this fragile cabin in the mountains, hunted like wild game. Again and again, the memory of his brother's last breath clawed into him, daring him to forget. He never would. When the first streak of pale gold touched the snow, Arlen stood and stepped outside. The air bit into his lungs. Frost cracked beneath his boots. The quiet around him felt too deliberate, too cautious, like a predator holding its breath. He scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but he knew better than to trust what the land chose to reveal. Behind him, Elder Nyra emerged, her cloak trailing patterns of deep red and gold across the snow. She regarded him in silence before speaking. "Your eyes do not rest." "They can't," Arlen replied. "Not while they're out there." "You think this ends only with their blood," she said, not accusing, not soft, simply the truth. Arlen's jaw tightened. "If that's the cost for keeping my family alive, then yes." Nyra stepped until she stood shoulder to shoulder with him. The morning light softened the sharp lines of her face, but her eyes held unbroken steel. "You cannot fight only from anger. The mountain will swallow men blinded by rage." He exhaled, slow and unsteady. "Then tell me what I'm fighting with." "Resolve," she answered, "and the love you have hidden beneath all that guilt." Arlen opened his mouth, but found no words. Because she was right. He had spent so long punishing himself for what he could not change that he had forgotten the one thing that still mattered, the people behind that wooden door. He would not lose them. Not here. Not today. A distant crack shattered the stillness, with snapping underweight. Arlen whipped toward the sound. 3 riders emerged from the pines, their silhouettes sharp and unmistakably armed. Behind them, 2 more figures approached on foot. They intended to flush him out, surround the cabin, drag him into the open. Classic strategy. Brutal, efficient. They expected fear to do their work for them. Arlen lifted his rifle. "Wake the girls," he said without turning. "They need to be ready." Nyra nodded once and disappeared inside. The riders halted at the edge of the clearing, horses snorting clouds into the cold air. Their leader, broad-shouldered, scar down his left cheek, spoke with a voice that rolled across the snow like gravel. "Crow, you had one chance to surrender last night. You threw it away." Arlen didn't answer. The man's confidence grated at him like sand on open wounds. "We only want you," the leader continued. "Step forward, and the others walk free." Arlen laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You expect me to believe that. I expect you to know you don't have a choice." Arlen raised his rifle an inch higher. "There's always a choice." The leader smiled, then dive for the wrong one. He snapped his hand up. A shot cracked through the morning. Arlen dropped to one knee, firing back before the echo faded. Snow exploded around the riders as bullets tore into the ground. Horses reared. Shouts split the air. Arlen rolled behind the stump of an old cedar, chambering another round with a practiced flick. His mind sharpened into something cold, precise. No fear. No hesitation. Only the line between survival and oblivion. A rider broke left, trying to flank the cabin. Arlen fired, hidden man's shoulder. The rider toppled into the snow, screaming. Another bullet whistled past Arlen's ear as he ducked low. Inside the cabin, he heard Mira shout something, followed by the thud of hurried footsteps. The leader barked orders, dragging his wounded man to cover. "Smoke the cabin out." Arlen's breath caught. "No." He surged from behind the stump, firing again at the 2 men approaching with lit torches. One fell instantly. The second stumbled but kept going, flames spitting bright against the pale morning. Before Arlen could take another shot, Elder Nyra burst from the cabin, throwing a handful of powder into the air. It erupted in a blinding flash, her people's smoke mixture meant to disorient attackers. The torchbearer reeled, dropping the flame into the snow where it hissed and died. Arlen seized the opening. He sprinted across the clearing, boots kicking up powdery white. The leader rose from behind a fallen log, gun aimed square at Arlen's chest. Time slowed. Arlen saw his brother's face again, not dying but alive, laughing beside him on a summer ridge years ago. The memory steadied his aim. He fired. The leader staggered, clutching his shoulder, firing wildly in return. One shot grazed Arlen's arm, burning hot. Arlen gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain. The man lunged, tackling him into the snow. They grappled, fists cracking against frozen ground. The world narrowed to raw, survival, breath and blood and bone. "You should have run," the leader snarled, fingers closing around Arlen's throat. Arlen forced the man's hand back, strength born from desperation and love for the people behind that wooden door. "I did," he rasped, "and running ends here." With one final heave, Arlen drove his elbow into the man's jaw. The leader collapsed, stunned. Arlen seized a nearby rock and brought it down once, ending the fight. Silence fell. Snow drifted gently again, as if nature waited for violence to finish before resuming its quiet work. The remaining gunmen, seeing their leader down and their assault broken, fled into the trees, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Arlen stood shaking, blood on his sleeve, breath ragged. His sisters rushed to him, relief and fear mixing on their faces. Elder Naira watched him with a soft, knowing pride. "It is done," she said. Arlen looked toward the ridge where the gunman vanished. "No," he answered quietly. "It's only beginning." But for the first time, he no longer felt alone facing it.